This is the Veterinary Project Podcast, episode 097.
Welcome to the show created by vets featuring absolutely no pets. This is the Veterinary Project Podcast, hosted by Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Leicht. Our resident veterinarians have swapped out their stethoscopes in favor of microphones to bring you the Veterinary Project Podcast, a show focused on real conversations aimed to connect this amazing profession full of remarkable people. Through the sharing of collective stories and wisdom and connecting over the many unique challenges we face, we invite you to join our community of veterinary professionals leading intentional lives. And now, here are the hosts of the Veterinary Project Podcast, Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Leicht.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Veterinary Project Podcast. I want to get rolling fast here because I think I have a tremendous opportunity here to get Johnny on some epic rants, but we shall see how this episode plays out. How's the day going, my man?
Buddy, I have already calmed down and gone back into my Zen area. You're out of time. I am well, thank you. It has been an exciting morning. We're getting lots done and things are flying every which way.
Yes, they are. So, I mean, I don't believe you. I think we're going to get you on some rants. We have Johnny wearing his clinic operator hat today, and we are going to dive into all things veterinary suppliers. So the relationship with veterinary suppliers, maybe negotiating with them a bit. Quickly, though, a little banter just to see, we're heading into the Canada Day long weekend and then followed by Independence Day in the States. So happy Independence Day to our American friends. What do you guys got going on for the weekend?
Absolutely. Very excited. I've been on the road quite a bit this last couple of weeks with business. So looking forward to spending the next 8 to 10 days with my family. We are going to be in a tent at a lake in North Saskatchewan. So I'm coming more towards your way. The in-laws have themselves a trailer there and look forward to spending time on a boat, fishing, swimming, and doing all those things we need to. A little bit of reset time, which I am really excited about. I told my wife, start of June, this one's a packed month, and it has proven true. So I can feel it. I need it. And I'm looking forward to just a little downtime.
Right on, man.
That's me.
Like it. We slept in a tent the other night, just in our backyard. So, I mean, let's not mislead anyone here. I am not like an outdoorsman, but Riley was very excited. So we did that. And actually it was pretty good. The classic tent, the sun is up at 4 a.m. and screaming in your face. And you're like, wow, it's time to get up.
Toasty. It gets toasty in there real quick. I think for our tents, this is like our third iteration, I believe. And it's our biggest one yet. And it makes it so that the kids have their spot. We have our spot. We can get our luggage. It's pretty darn comfy. Yep. So nice. I like it, but it's one of those big ones. How about you guys? What are you guys doing?
We're not really sure yet. Either hanging around the city or going. My parents have a cabin at Jackfish Lake, hour and a half away. The opposite of tenting. It's like a full all year long cabin, heated, air conditioned. So if we go there, it's glamping to the extreme. So
is it even camping at all?
No, it's not at all.
Not at all. No, you're on there. That's a beauty lake too. I had some fun there back in the day. Great Lakes in Saskatchewan for anybody that hasn't been there. They are amazing at this time of year, as long as the bugs stay away. But we've had lots of rain, so we'll see. There might be lots.
Yeah. Okay, let's get on with this. We got to get you ranting. And also, I keep joking on that, but you have so much knowledge in this space, and it's an important space. So going back.
I'm backing up. Let's start with why this discussion even happened. Go off of something that you've been reading off Facebook in this last little bit.
So I honestly, I don't remember the specific post, but I'm part of various veterinary Facebook groups, and I saw a discussion in there around negotiating with reference labs. So people were, asking, how do you choose your lab supplier? And then how do you negotiate contracts and go back and forth and pros and cons? And I was like, man, this is a good topic. And that's when I texted you and I was like, we should dive into this. You're an expert in this area. Let's bring some value. So I guess for this discussion, we are talking, pharma, suppliers, retail, lab, kind of veterinary suppliers in general.
Yes. So first off, I am not an expert. So number two, learning with experience and time. And number three, when we are pre-recording setup for this, this is a really niche episode. I'm happy we're doing it. I'm going to try and limit our discussion to pharma, retail, and suppliers, because the discussion on lab, which you have some questions for me, and we're going to walk through it. It's an episode in itself. And I think in the Facebook post, it was related to someone that had already been open and then was looking at a lab agreement. My comment back to you on that one was they're 10 months, 12 months, 14 months too late already.
Okay. And just to set that for our listeners, in that Facebook post, this clinic was new. It was like 8 or 9 months old. And the owner was saying, how do I handle this? Your comment was they're 13 months too late. So what you're saying is these agreements should be in place before the doors even open. Is that, if I'm hearing you correctly?
I believe for opening up Bridgeland as a new entity, when we opened in August, I had already had my lab agreements in place. It must have been January or February.
Okay. So like 6-ish months in advance where they're in place, which leads me to believe you started negotiating those before January and February.
Absolutely. They took us a few months to negotiate.
Okay.
Yeah. And so by doing so ahead of time, and again, we were supposed to be open a couple months earlier. So to have those agreements in place 1 or 2, 3 months in advance gives you a lot of leeway to then focus on the supplier end, which is equipment, your tables, all of those pieces, which then also need to be negotiated as either a package or together. And again, we'll get into it, but the more time you can give yourself, the better.
Okay. I am taking us on a quick tangent already. I know we have a negotiations episode planned in the fall, like the Never Split the Difference book. In my opinion, time is the number one tool. So what you're saying there is when you paint yourself in a corner from a time perspective where our clinic is open, patients are coming through the door, lab work is being done daily, you haven't given yourself any time, right? You're under pressure.
Absolutely. And you've already shown your cards. So you've already shown the reference lab, of which you're going to have to use one, what you're sending. And therefore they're able to put their algorithm and their objectives in place, which are obviously going to be to their benefit. And then adding to that, you've got less leverage. Now, that being said, we're coming up on our first year agreement with the company that we're using as a reference lab. And because we've done so well, then it opens up opportunity for additional spend. So it does go both ways. But why would you show your card so early is my point. Yeah. You don't need to.
Okay. Well, I mean, let's dive in. This is already a great start to it, but I know you have kind of, I don't know if I want to call them tips or bullet points that we're going to work through. The first one you had mentioned to me is choosing your partner wisely. And I do like how you have it listed as partner.
Absolutely. So I love this and gain it over time. And sometimes, and I know with my pharma reps, I can sometimes be known as a prick and or pushy. I know it when it comes to that. Back in my days, managing the big hospitals, if I wanted something and if I needed it and I was partnered with this group, I expect it. And if I'm not getting it from the rep, I'm going to go to the next level to get it, because I know that our relationships matter. And it's not about being soft. It's about coming to an agreement on what we're giving each other. In order for that partnership to have its best benefit, I'm going to partner with you and I'm going to say no to 2 others. But in return, I'm going to have some expectations. And when they're not met from a pharma partnership perspective, it doesn't go well. So backing it up a little bit, everybody has something to sell. And whether it's Canada or the US, and I've worked in both markets, there's many times where there's limited differences between the companies and what they're selling, and or those differences in the individual products don't make up for the more important part, which is your relationships. Your pharma partners, your suppliers, your lab, it's all based on relationships. And if you can get that right with a few of them, then you're going to do really well in both what they offer you, the extras that are included, the rebates that are involved, and the insurance that your clients and patients and your team is going to be looked after. And this doesn't matter whether it's a new clinic or a clinic that's been around for 10 years. I see, and I used to be that key account manager that would go into clinics, and you'd have 5 or 6 different companies represented through the vaccines, the parasiticides, the therapeutics, and the antimicrobials. Those are 4 different major categories that any pharma company in particular is going to want to earn your business. And if you spread that across 5 or 6 different businesses or 5 or 6 different partners, your volume isn't going to be great in any of them. Your ability to focus isn't going to be great in any of them. Let's be specific here. If you're going with one of the big guys for vaccines, and then you then jump to another person for the therapeutics, and you jump to another one for the parasiticides, and you jump another one for the antimicrobials, wow, you've actually just blended yourself out of the entire market, as opposed to going with 2 or 3 of the majors. And if you're going with 2 or 3 of the major partners, the pharma partners, I'm talking about the Zoetises, the Boehringers, the Elencos, there's multiple different ones, Merck's out there, then you have an opportunity to really get to know that company, their product, and as a result of it, they want to get to know you because they're trying to sell you and you need to buy.
Okay. I love this. I have lots to say. So quickly summarizing some of what I heard there is very clearly setting expectations up front and being comfortable saying no. So this is even almost a bit of a boundary discussion because you said you have to say no to lots of things and then really standing up for what you need to get out of the relationship, expecting that to be delivered, and then in turn delivering what you agree to.
Absolutely.
And then kind of going into what you said, I do have a question because you've been on both sides of this, right? You have been in the pharma industry as the rep that comes into the clinic. Put that hat on, walk into a veterinary clinic that is carrying just the entire spectrum of products from every different company. How, from the pharma standpoint, what does that make you think and feel about that relationship with that vet clinic?
Perfect. So if I've got my pharma hat on, which I used to have, and I walk into one of those practices, the first thing I think of is, wow, it's going to be hard to get their business because they don't have their shit together. Meaning every doctor's chosen what kind of NSAID they want, what parasiticide they want, and it's a mess. And therefore, as a rep, it's going to be very hard for me to get my objectives done. And you said when walking into the clinic, a good rep will have already met and figured out their objectives ahead of walking into that clinic. They'll have planned it out, and they usually have that planned out to their objectives for the year. And guess what? You're on a grid. As a clinic, you're gridded out, A, B, C, or D, 1, 2, 3, 4. They all name them different things, but they have an objective for how much product they want to sell you.
Okay. If I'm that clinic, you just walked into my clinic, you have your objective set, you see my plethora of products. Where do I land on your grid?
It's going to be lower. But again, it depends on the size of your practice, right? Are you a 2-person practice or are you 16-person practice? That also makes a difference. If you have volume, I'm going to spend more time there. If you have volume, but I have nothing on the shelf that you're selling of mine, it's going to be hard for me to do the extra for you. So when I walk into your practice, my goal is to get to know what you have on the product on the shelf as a pharma rep and understand the why. Because if I can figure out the why, is it client-based cost? Is it quality of medicine based? Is it rep and relationship based? Or is it some combination of those? I want to understand that. And if I can understand it, then I can try to sell to you.
Okay. Taking the opposite side, you had talked about like 1 to 3 different, products or companies. Is there a risk if someone was sort of one company all in, right? Like where's the sweet spot there?
Yeah, I like to have it between 3 to 4 max. And again, it depends on the size of the clinic because the size of the clinic will dictate how much you have to carry in terms of volume. Right now, for our clinics, as an example, we have one of the major companies that's not at the table with us. And the reason being is I have to pick and choose. And for what we picked and choose based on our objectives and what's important to us, that company's out right now. That being said, what I've learned early in life is just because they're out right now doesn't mean they're going to be out in future. Goes back to the theme of the entire podcast and our community is don't burn bridges. And this one was new to me. way back in the day, there was one company that I was like, oh, that is shit. Like they sell crap products. Why would we ever use them? I don't even think about it. Don't know the reps. Like couldn't tell you who they were for night and day. 2 years later, all of a sudden they go and buy a category of drug, and then they come in with great reps. And then I'm like, oh shit, I actually have to buy from them and form relationships with them. And they're going to be one of my major suppliers. Never say never in this world, because depending on what's going on in the and I'm speaking pharmaceuticals in particular here, things change. As we know, consolidation continues to occur, and or there's a matrix of the different categories that the government comes in sometimes and says, hey, they have too much market penetration in this one category. You need to diverge or divest some of those products. And all of a sudden, the company that you had nothing to do with is now at your table once a month. So never say never, don't burn bridges, and recognize that one day those people you don't know might actually be people into your practice once a month.
Mm-hmm.
Things change.
Yeah. And it's important, like everything cycles. Every business goes through cycles. It's no different if you're a pharmaceutical company, right? There's going to be good periods and bad periods, and management will change and reps will change, So, I mean, that's just a good point. And it comes back to the relationships. Like, you probably see reps, I don't know how often this happens, but occasionally switching pharmaceutical companies. And now that rep is representing a different product line.
Absolutely. That happens all the time. And if you think that you're chatting about one rep or you're really bad to them, well, just remember, those reps all talk behind the scenes. There is nothing better than coming to a career fair day, one of the major conferences, and catching up. And who are you catching up with? Your colleagues and competitors across the aisle, and hearing what's going on. And what do reps love to do? They love to gossip. And what are they gossiping about? The shit that's going on in the veterinary industry. And what does that usually include? Clinics that are out there, companies that are out there. And if you think that you're getting away with being shitty to this one over and over again, that spreads. And then maybe, like you said, rep changes, etc. You just hurt yourself that way.
Okay.
Even though I'm hard on my reps and they know that, there has to be respect there. And the worst thing you want to do is get black. I'll leave the rest of that comment alone.
Okay. That was leading me into my next sort of question is, how do you walk that line of, you want to have these great relationships,
yep,
but you have expectations, and you said sometimes you're hard on your reps. Maybe elaborate on that. How do you do both where, you're getting great value, you're getting great service, you're not being pushed around, but very respectful and great relationships?
The theme's coming back to, I remember we discussed this when we were doing the 5 tips to open a vet clinic. Be direct. Ask them for what you need and what you want. You're not going to hurt their feelings. And if you hurt their feelings, they shouldn't be in your clinic to start with. And ask for the business, just the same as what they're going to do. And there is companies that you're going to have to say no to, even though they have great product. They could have amazing product. They could be the number one company out there. You still have to say no. And that's all right. And if they were a good rep, those reps are already going to have personality trait. They're already going to have set you up, whether you're in analytical, all those other ones that we've already discussed. So they're going to have an idea of whether you're conflict averse, don't want to say no, etc. Be direct. Makes this conversation a lot easier.
Yeah. And I see that with you. I mean, you're pretty good at this, at being direct. These are my needs. And I see it in the veterinary industry a lot. Sometimes we shy away from that, and like you said, the reps probably have, you could speak to this, a ton of training in this arena. We're not talking about how does this product work. It's how do I deal with the person sitting across the table?
Absolutely. And I deal with multiple key account managers. They have big geographies. They have things to do. And if it doesn't include me, Mosaic, Bridgeland, anything else, then that's all right. They can then go spend the time in the areas they need to, as opposed to wasting their time with me when they're not going to get the sales they need to. And guess what? They're salespeople. That's what their job is. They're not there. Again, part of our job is to create relationships, but that's not their main objective. Their main objective is to sell to you. They can't sell to you. They need to get elsewhere and go meet their objectives. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm. That's It makes me think like in the negotiating space, some of my training around it is people are often trained to not like the word no. And it's like, no is great. Like in my opinion, like if someone's just straight up to you, no, it's like, awesome. Thank you. We can quit wasting each other's time. Have a great day. We all have tons of things to do.
Absolutely. We deal with this in the NSAID world, in the parasiticide world, where you're trying to figure out your volumes pre the start of the year. Alberta, we're lucky and not where we don't have a lot of parasiticide needs. We don't have heartworm, etc. But we still have our reps coming in and, pre-booking, pre-selling for the following year. That matters. And if it's a straight no, they can get to go where they need to go. And you can then deal with the people you need to deal with over and over and over again.
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm gonna start taking us down a bit of a tangent into contracts. And I know this can get really nebulous. You've mentioned many times volume, and obviously the more volume that you can do with a product or a company, the better pricing you can get. What would be some of the things that jump out to you if you're considering entering into a contract, whether this is pharma or lab?
Yes. So the first thing you want to do is you want to have an idea of what you think you're going to sell yourself. So if you have sales reports in your practice management software and you can pull them, you need to do so because you need to know where you sit on any of those 4 major categories and or those categories combined, or perhaps it's related to your lab agreements that you're trying to put in place. When we opened Bridgeland, I really had no idea what I was going to be doing in terms of reference lab as compared to our internal lab. And those are 2 different companies that we ended up going with. So it is kind of a shot in the dark where you then use your relationships and trust with the different reps to try and figure out what is an objective we think we can meet for the amount they're going to be asking back. And then you also want to play the game. You want to hear what different companies are going to come to the table with to see what incentives are out there. Because if you don't ask, why would they give it to you? And therefore, again, it's based on volume. If you're saying you're going to be a $2 million practice, that's a lot different than saying you're going to be a $12 million practice. And there's going to be people that want to be at the table, and they might not want to be at the table for the right reason. They might just want the dollars in there. But guess what? When we're talking about lab, when we're talking about pharma, when we're talking about suppliers, it's so much more than that. Shit's going to hit the fan. There's going to be lab work that's going to go astray. There's going to be equipment that breaks down. There's going to be drug reactions that need pharmacovigilance. All those pieces you need to be able to identify and have as part of your negotiations to know that when you sign on the dotted line, you're going to get the support you need and meet the sales objectives that they're going to want as part of that agreement. So that all comes into play in juggling incentives, objectives, and also cash involved, because there's a lot of cash incentives that can come into play as well.
Mm-hmm. Is there any scenario where not entering a contract is the way to go, right? Like,
absolutely. Again, depends on what we're speaking about. So let's talk suppliers. That might be the simplest one. If you are working with a certain supplier and you have a whole bunch of needs, signing a contract might make sense because you get a bigger discount across the broad categories that they offer. That's a simple one. And that discount makes up for having to go with one single supplier versus spreading it out over others, and you save time. That's a simple one. On the pharma side, signing partnership agreements and or that only occurs with bigger volume clinics and or with corporate setups, et cetera, where there's a rebate grid and you're going outside of that rebate grid associated with potentially personalized CE, care related to what's going on in the clinics and how to make sure that their products are front and center. And then thirdly, making sure that your category objectives are met. So if I say I'm going to spend in a certain category, then I can meet that. And if I can't, then don't sign on the dotted line. It's only going to burn bridges.
Okay. Let's go into that a little bit. When you talk about burn bridges, like what would be, I guess, what do you mean specifically by that? And what would be some of the like ramifications to watch for? Let's pretend I've signed a contract that I'm going to do X amount of reference lab work and I come in, 10% short, 20% short on the year.
Yeah, lab's different than pharma, Mike. So on that, I don't want to go in too much detail on the lab side of things because it is again, that's a whole discussion in itself. albeit to say, if you're not meeting your thresholds for what your lab agreement looks like, you're going to have a discussion with that rep and what it needs in terms of either an extension on that lab. Do you have to drop the amounts that you're being given in terms of certain incentives? Or is there, at the end of the day, depending on what you've signed, a cash payment that you need to make to that lab to make up the difference? All those are in play depending on how short you are.
Mm-hmm.
And also at what stage of the agreement you are.
Yeah.
It's a weird one, but if you're in year 1 of year 6, it looks much different than year 5 of year 6.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what about on the pharma side? Is there any?
On the pharma side, it's a little bit more laid back. When I say about burning bridges, if I say, hey, I'm going to use this certain parasiticide or this parasiticide category with that group, and then all of a sudden halfway through the year, they come in and they see a different product on the shelf, and perhaps it's just because it just came out and you wanted to test it, and then all of a sudden, you're blowing through it. Well, you better have a conversation with your rep about that. You better let your key account manager know, because it is a relationship and a partnership, and they can see it in the sales numbers coming through. And if you don't let them know, or you don't talk through that, well, that's burning bridges, because they have certain objectives that their own sales are set to, their own objectives are set to for what they're making. And all of a sudden you blindside them, that hurts. And it might not relate to I'm trying to say, how do I put this? They might have put money up front, or they might be providing CE opportunities that are outside the norm. And those that's money that they take on, they spend to the benefit that you're going to follow through with your objectives as well. And when that doesn't happen, it hurts. And I've had that happen to me before, and it doesn't feel good. So then are you going to spend as much time with those individuals or those clinics in future? Probably not. And you remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. That goes back to expectations and then delivering on them. And I mean, I get it. Like, stuff happens in lots of scenarios, but that comes back to what you said, clearly communicating, like, we're trying, but we're not on track. Here's what's going on.
Absolutely. And here's why. We've got a certain situation right now that's happening on the feline side where there's a new parasiticide that's come out that's actually really good. And so we brought it into our clinics, and we're going to continue to use it because it makes sense for both the patients and the clients. I have an objective with a different parasiticide already in place. Well, guess what? That group knows about it. We're going to talk through it, and perhaps there's different things we can do in the second half of the year to ensure that everybody wins.
Okay, nice.
That's conversation.
I like it. Okay, one last question on this vein, and then we'll start wrapping it up here. Anything to keep in mind for someone potentially considering exiting their clinic? So as an example, I sign a 6 or a 7 or an 8-year contract with whoever, but I'm planning on selling my vet clinic in 2 or 3 years.
Yep. So the first off on it is, and this is my opinion only, just based purely on opinion, is I always try and keep those contracts as short as possible. And I'm a pain in the ass, and I know it. And it probably costs me a little bit more, actually, because I can never get as good of a deal because they want to extend that out. It's just like cars. Why do you think that they go to 84 months right now, 72 months right now for car payments? Because they get way more interest, they get you locked in, and they know you're not going anywhere for a while. I hate that. I want to have as much flexibility as I can. So I'm going to try and make those deals as short as I can. And if that's 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, it's really dependent on what you're talking about. The second thing is when you go to exit or you want to sell your clinic, either to an individual or to a corporate, that's going to come up into the conversation. As an example, for a corporate, they're going to ask you what your leases in place are, whether they are for lab, reference lab, internal, ultrasounds, x-rays. Those would be the main ones that we see. And in most cases, we're being the corporate, are going to request that lease agreement comes to an end before we take over. So in that case, then that's a discussion that happens. Now, also, and this is the extra, is if that corporate uses that lab or if that corporate uses that lease group, then perhaps it's just a simple switch over and there's a sign off. And there's usually a clause in the contract that will allow the lab to be able to agree to that, but it's on their written agreement. So there is a lot of negotiating room when it comes to those types of exit plans. Just know that it's very normal Don't be scared to go into an agreement just because you say, you might sell in 2-3 years. You don't know. And a corporate is, or even a private buyer is not going to balk at buying you because of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Because they're all standard, whether it is ultrasounds or dental or equipment or labs. Like, this is what we need to do in order to ensure cash flow in a clinic. I'm not a huge fan of leases. I don't do leases in my own life, but that's my opinion. That's my view. I still have agreements in place for my practices because it makes most sense for the practice.
Okay. Excellent, Jonathan. Anything specific? I have one. I'm going to zoom back out and kind of wrap this, but I want to give you a chance because I may have missed something here. Anything specific you want to touch on?
Yes. Make sure that your gatekeeper, whether it is your front reception, whether it is your clinic manager, whether it is whoever, gives access to your major partners to be able to get in front of decision makers. And decision makers could either be the veterinarians and or the owner, or sometimes the clinic manager who's making the choices on inventory or equipment, etc. If they don't have access to the decision maker, you might as well throw that relationship out the door. And I see that in some of the smaller clinics sometimes. And I go, you guys are wasting your time. These people want to help you. Give them the chance. And if they're a pain in the ass, or they're not giving proper education, or they're not doing well by your clients or patients, then kick them out the door, but at least give them a chance. And then choose appropriately, as opposed to saying no to everybody, which means you lose in the end. Like, why do that? Give them a chance. And and it makes no sense to me. Yes, we're all busy. Yes, we're all tired. Yes, we're all understaffed, etc. It actually is a nice break for your team when it's with the right partner and relationship to have individuals from these groups come in and share. I've got 1.5 hours. It's with a specialist for the Mosaic group. She gave me a call at 10:30 and said, we could do anything. And because I built relationships with her over the year, she is open to whatever matters to my group, which is going to be different than if I didn't have a relationship and this was just your standard CE. Wow, what an opportunity. And I have so much respect for this lady. And when she phones, I'm going to answer every single time. And now my DVMs and my RVTs get to take advantage of that because of relationships. I absolutely love that. Why would, and that's just by saying yes, as opposed to saying no, oh, we're too tired. We're like, this is the opportunity to get ahead, in my view.
It was pretty close to a rant, Jonathan. Good job. And when you held your phone up, I could see it's like blowing up with stuff. So we'll wrap quick. My comment on what you just said is for the veterinarians that are listening, or anyone in the veterinary space, think about how you feel when you're in a room discussing something with someone and you just spent 10 minutes going through everything, and you get to that point where it's like, okay, what do we want to do? And they're like, oh, it's not my decision to make. We have to go discuss this with these other people. And you're just sitting there being like, crap, like have the decision makers present for the discussions, right? Because otherwise you're just going to be repeating everything again.
Yeah. And it takes time out of your day. There's 20 other things to do. Sometimes you're going, oh, now I've got to meet, but every time it's worth it if you're present.
Okay. Last thing here, Jonathan, as we wrap it, zooming out, if someone is listening to this and they're a veterinary clinic owner and this entire discussion makes them want to vomit, like the idea of, negotiating or difficult conversations, or however we want to frame this with suppliers, is something they just doesn't sit well with them. How do they handle that? Because we know from our previous episode, cost of goods is what the number 2 expense item in a clinic. This is very important stuff for the success of your clinic and then the well-being of everyone down the line, your staff, your patients, your clients.
Yeah.
How can they step into this?
Then there's groups that are groups and alliances that are made that bring individual clinics together so that they have the power of volume in order to be able to gain the relationships and rebates they need. So it maybe doesn't have to be done on an individual level. I would say seek them out, sign up for them, and therefore divest of the responsibility to the bigger group.
Nice.
Because otherwise you're hurting your staff, you're hurting yourself, you're hurting your business by not taking that effort to do the best you can in this area.
All right. Right on, man. Okay, let's get you out of here so you can go tenting up and get bit by mosquitoes. You are selling yourself short. You are an expert in this area. So I just want to say that as we wrap, but I will give you the last chance to close this episode out. Send everyone off here to Canada Day, Independence Day, with some wise words.
Darn right. So as we're going into July, no matter where you are from, whether it's pharma, suppliers, lab, etc., it does come down to relationships. You can do so well in this area to the help of your clients, your patients, and your business by having the proper relationships, knowing when to say no, and then going full bore with those that you say yes to. You can do really well in this stage, in this area of your business, if you so want to. It is open and ready, and people want to help you.
Thank you for listening to the Veterinary Project Podcast. As a recap on behalf of our hosts, the Veterinary Project Podcast will be releasing new episodes weekly, so be sure to tune in as we bring you more conversations aimed at helping you enjoy a life well lived. If you enjoyed what you heard on the show and you want to stay in the know, please like, love, and or subscribe to the podcast on the listening platform of your choosing, as we're available on all the usual suspects. If you know of others that may benefit from these conversations, we'd love it if you please share the show with them, as this will help us grow our community to reach more and more veterinary professionals. Speaking of which, if you are a veterinary professional and would like to get connected with more like-minded individuals who are joining us on this journey, please send an email to theveterinaryprojectpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll invite you to be a part of our private Facebook group. General feedback, requests for information, or perhaps requests to be a guest on the show can also be sent to the Veterinary Project Podcast @gmail.com. Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Leicht, thank you for listening to the show, and we'll catch you again next week for another episode of the Veterinary Project Podcast. Bye for now.